All right, I'm here talking with,
Charles Nutter from Red Hat.
and I think one of your biggest claims to fame is JRuby.
That's what most folks know me for. I'm the JRuby guy to many crowds.
Yeah. And how long have you been working on JRuby?
JRuby, I was actually thinking about this today. We've actually been working, we've been paid to work on it full time for over 8 years now. I worked on it for a couple of years before that too, so pretty much
10 years.
a decade of working
Wow,
on JRuby at this point.
I didn't know it was that long of a project. That's pretty impressive.
A lot of interesting stuff to solve, interesting challenges all the way. So.
Yeah, there's a video that I saw, I don't know when it was, chronologically, it was like a year ago, or maybe it was this past summer, but it was a video, I think, with you and Tom, and it was, by the way, version 9000, that's just hilarious. But you're talking about all the problems that you still have to solve, and having some interns come in and solve some of them, and look at different ways to approach them. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely lots of challenges in taking a language like Ruby and having it run on a virtual machine like Java.
Right.
But there's also a lot of benefits you mentioned too in the past about doing that. But I think what's interesting is the topic that you're doing here, which is sort of tied to this, but it's more about just open source projects in general.
Right.
So,
right.
And your experiences in doing a project that's almost been a decade long, that's an open source project. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Right. Well, I figured I'm not an expert, or I wouldn't consider myself an expert on open source, but having done it for so long now, 10 years on JRuby. In the 90s, I worked on a project called Lightstep as well.
Okay.
I have experiences that might be worth sharing, and I wanted to kind of lay out what it is to become an open source contributor, get involved in a project, and maybe even spin up your own project. Tips, tricks, things to look out for, and just kind of help people get past that hurdle.
Okay. What would you say is one of the I don't know if difficult is the right word, but I'll just use it anyway, one of the more difficult aspects of being on an open source project in terms of either contributing or starting it up and leading it?
Well, probably the most difficult thing for folks is finding a place to start. I've spent a lot of time focusing on that, making sure that people should aim for projects that they need, that they use, stuff that they're familiar with. Start out by just helping with bug trackers, help update documentation, provide support on mailing lists and forums, get to know the project. That gives you an idea of where the gaps are, what sort of things you can help with, gets you familiar with the code base, and then you can move from there to start submitting bug fixes and patches for stuff.
Okay. You also mentioned, because you were tweeting about this last night as you were getting back from Java 1 this week, that you being on a project for so long and being in the open source community for so long, that maybe you may have the kind of blinder effect. You do something for on whatever it is, and then do I know of other people's views and how they take it? And I think what some people said is, in some large enterprise corporations, they still have potentially somewhat of a negative view on open source. And how do you overcome that and say, hey, it's not all bad. There's actually good aspects to open source, and we should definitely consider taking a look at it if you do get that kind of resistance?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing is to just keep working at it, keep trying. Whenever there's a new challenge, some library you need, an application, deciding what operating system to spin up on new servers, make the suggestion. Suggest open source. Try and list all the benefits of it, compare and contrast what you're going to get out of a commercial or closed source offering versus that open source. You can wear them down eventually. You start to show, okay, we spent this much on proprietary or closed source software over the years. Here's what we could have been doing with open source. We could have had all these extra resources. You got to hit them in the wallet. You got to really show them where they're going to get the benefit out of this as being part of the community. It's all about the dollars, man.
It's hilarious. You talk about, as a developer, you go in, I think sometimes with, this is a technically interesting problem and we could do this and do that, and then really at the end of the day it's like, what I just showed is what really counts for people at the end of the day, is does this cost a lot of money to do it? And like you said, if you can show doing something brings that down, that's actually, then that helps you win your argument in some ways.
Absolutely.
So, all right, cool, thanks.
Excellent.